Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before I get to our guests here today, well, first of all, everyone, if you haven't recognized her already, we have Monica back on for the third time. She's one of the handful of guests that we've had on for the third time now. But I mean, we had her on about 8 months ago, and I figured, with everything that's been going on in the world these last 8 months, I mean, normally my limit of waiting a year for a guest to reappear, I might as well just scratch that off because, with this whole pandemic, who knows? And yeah, I mean, so a lot has changed in our lives since we last talked, Monica. But again, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Ryan, I am honored to be here, especially if you have that 1 year rule and we're about 8 months or so. And yes, a lot has happened since we last spoke, because I think it was literally right at the beginning of the year. And who would have said in 2020? I mean, so much could have changed in the past 8 months. And you know what? You talk about the year. For me, everything since pretty much March until now has been non existent. So I almost feel like we just talked last month, practically.
Yeah, it's been absolutely. I mean, I can still remember this day when they shut down all the sports, and I was like, "Wow, this is absolutely insane." So it's just been just a whirlwind. But what is your journey and experience through this pandemic been like? Because every guest that I've had on since has a completely different story when it comes to their experience with this whole thing.
I think you're so right. It was interesting because in March, right before everything closed down, I headed out. I'm in Texas right now, and I headed out to California to do a judge's certification clinic. If you remember last year, I'd come off of 10 years of competing, 30 competitions, three world championships, and what was incredible was last November being inducted into the INBA PNBA Hall of Fame. And so part of me was saying, what I want to do now is change gears. We'll talk about that probably later on, because I've had one surgery, still one more surgery to come. But the idea was to get myself right, get some time, and really put in a lot towards the judging side, towards helping athletes be their best and get to the stage, and what it was to do all of that. So went to California for that weekend, literally came back. I think it was like the that weekend of the 15th or so of March. Came back within the week, all the gyms are closed, all the restaurants, basically we shut down and we went into quarantine. And although we were seeing some of that happening abroad, we were like, no, that can never happen here in the US. Well, it did. So the biggest things that I found were just really having to think quick and adapt. You can either pout and say, "Oh my gosh, I don't have a place to work out. I can't do this, I can't do that," or you can completely do a 180 and say, "Okay, how can I adapt?" For me, it was how can I adapt as an athlete, and then secondly, how can I adapt as a coach and a trainer and find different strategies and new ways to keep the same high standards. Which, by the way, months later you are seeing, because all of a sudden competitions and things are opening up, and it's amazing what quarantine can do as well, and how great you can become when you find those strategies to do in your home or anywhere else.
Well, I always say too, especially for bodybuilders, this is the one scenario where they might actually enjoy it more because the social obligations, you don't really need to be into it as much now with the quarantine. So they might have more opportunity to just focus in. But one thing that I really appreciated about what you did is that on your Instagram page, you were doing these at home workouts that you even had you and your daughter, and you were just demonstrating stuff with even like, gallon jugs and, broom handles and stuff. So it's really is all about adapting. And what really inspired you to do all that? Because I mean, I think it did help out a lot of people, and it's great that you were doing that.
Thank you. I mean, beggars can't be choosers. And so, of course, we were put in a situation where a lot was taken out of our control. And when something like that happens, you can only worry about or do what you can control. So it's about switching that mind frame, I think, and saying, okay, my audience is very varied, because yes, I will train those who there's a certain side of the competition prep, but of course there's that other side that just wants to get well, be well, look well. I also have a different age group that a lot of times that I appeal to. Just being 55 myself, it's not like when you get that 20-year-old or 30-year-old coach that doesn't understand what it's like to have a shoulder injury, or to have ACL problems, or to have a bad back. It doesn't mean you have to slow down. It just means that you have to pivot and change and shift exactly what you're doing. So I thought, okay, what can I do? Um, during this time, and it was trying to put out content for people who were either stuck at home, some people who didn't have any equipment whatsoever and thought, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to do anything. Well, that's not the case at all. So I did a whole series, you're right, on how you can work out literally from home with some of the things that you have. So with the gallon jugs, with the broomstick, it's amazing. You'll put a couple of gallon jugs on the side of a broomstick, all of a sudden you have a bar. So many things that you can do just using from home. So I did a whole series on that. Then we went into, okay, what happens if you have bands? You don't have any other equipment, but you might have bands. So I did a whole another series on, arms and legs and shoulder and what have you, just for those being able to go that step up. Once your little jugs were too little, how can we step that up with bands? And then finally, I did some things also for those who are fortunate enough. I don't have a whole setup, but I do have a bench. I do have, a few things, a bar. And so able to use equipment at home and what that would look like. And I figured, it was my gift or my being able to help others out in a time, whatever it is that they were looking for. Hopefully, they were able to get some ideas and use those and hopefully spark other things that they could do on their own.
Yeah, and when I said this is the time if everyone wants to get in shape, this is the time to do it because I mean you have much more free time. I mean that excuse that we hear of all the time of I just don't have the time to get in shape. It's like, well, if you have that excuse right now, I don't know what's going on in your life, but this is the time really to do it. But in Texas where you're at, how long in the shutdown before the gyms finally started to open up? What was that process like?
I think here in Texas, we're actually quite fortunate. I now still see some of my colleagues who are who do compete or so in Australia, New Zealand, and some of these other countries where their gyms are still closed. We were very fortunate in Texas, even, compared to the rest of the United States. And I think even especially my particular gym destination, Dallas, where you have a hodgepodge. It's not necessarily just a competitor's gym, but it's a higher level athlete's gym in the sense that you could just be any old person from the street, but if your mind is there and you just want to go and you want to do things seriously, that's the gym, that's the place for you to go. So they opened up. I mean, the minute we could open up, it was still a couple of months. I mean, it still was towards, what is it, mid-May or so, end of May, where we finally did open up. But that's the beauty of it. It's a very spacious gym as well. So we are not bound, even though we have to follow certain masking procedures and laws. I mean, it is very hard for me to work out with a mask. I just can't do it. And, so for even for that, I'd rather just work out at home or outdoors. But if I am in a gym atmosphere, we were fortunate enough because we are all 6 feet apart, not having to wear a mask when you're going ahead and doing that.
I tried myself to wear a mask and work out, and that was, oh my god. And I mean, yeah, that's a whole different podcast in and of itself of me talking about wearing a mask when working out. But that was one of those where I just told myself, I was like, I had to move back in with my parents for the pandemic, and luckily we have like, just enough equipment downstairs to maintain a pump basically. So I just told him, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna work out at home now for the rest of this. Until there's a vaccine, until people stop wearing masks, I'm just gonna work out from home because I can't deal with this. But yeah, it's something that I mean I would have never guessed this in a million years. And I even told my grandpa, I mean, World War II vet, and I was like, have you ever experienced anything like this in your life? Out of all the stuff that you've experienced, it's like nothing has been as crazy as what's been going on right now. So that's just I look at that and I'm like, wow, if he thinks that, then
I think a couple of things that, call it fortunate or unfortunate. Um, I grew up in Argentina. My mother's Argentine, my dad is German. I'm a mutt. I was born in New York, but I was actually there between 1974 and 1981, which was a very, very difficult time in terms of there's a lot of terrorism. I was 13 years old, and I'll remember this. This is way, 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 way before you were even in consideration of your parents.
94,
Um,
yep.
well, yeah, no, this was way before that, but we had 8 bombs that were put in the building that I lived in Buenos Aires. And 3 of those bombs went off. I was 13 years old. I'll never forget it. I was watching the $6 Million Man. That's what I'm saying, was way, way before Steve Austin, way back when. But when you're 13 and you hear a blast like that, and everything is exploding and burning and this and that on the outside. My dad actually happened to be on a business trip, so he was here in the States. It was my mom, and she said, "Pack your stuff. If this continues, we're out of here." But I lived through having to. So my kids look at me and they say, "Mom, you're weird sometimes," because I will always have a little bit of extra toilet paper in my bag. I will carry a candle or a lighter or something. And some of those experiences come from the experiences I had as a child. And I don't think here in this country, in the United States, we've never had to go through something like that. And I'm referring to, remember all the toilet paper hoarding in the beginning of,
Yeah.
of this whole crisis and everything, and why the toilet paper. But we did go out and we got a few things because we saw what might be happening with what was going in China. And we said, "Hey, I've been through some stuff like this as a kid in another country. I'm going to go ahead and start a few things." And so, in a way, teaching our kids, and I think your whole generation, like you said, Ryan, you haven't seen stuff like this. This is going to change all of you. In a huge way. And I think it's going to make us a little bit more in tune with maybe even some of the other countries in the world that we look at them sometimes and say, "Oh, well, they're a third world country, or they're a poor country." No, the fact that there wasn't any toilet paper here had nothing to do with us being a third world country. It was just what was going on in supply and demand. So I think that's going to change a lot of our perceptions and hopefully make us a lot more ready, whether that is, working out, adapting, work in general, going to school, our daily life, whatever that may be.
As a history major, yeah, I can say the US has it fairly easy when it comes to dealing with violence and tragedy and stuff. And when you mentioned Argentina, the only thing that I really remember is the Falklands War, which was a big thing that we did about that, but that was a couple of years after you
That's why I
left.
got into journalism to begin with. I was 16 years old when I moved over here, and Ted Koppel used to host a show called Nightline, and I actually translated a letter from my best friend in Argentina talking about 14 and 15-year-old soldiers who were in the Falklands. I call them the Malvinas because I'm very pro Argentina for that. And I translated that letter. They actually sent in a crew from Chicago to have me read that. I have upstairs letters and letters from grandparents, from soldiers, from people. I was the American who was pro Argentina at a time when the British were, doing this, that, and the other. So I remember that time very, very well. And you know what? It was that made me realize that one person, there's always a third side to every coin, and that one person can make a difference. And I've lived my life that way, not just for history or something like that, but in everything that we do, bringing it back even to the health and the wellness and the working out. Every single thing, we can make a difference in our own lives and in others' lives.
Well, geez, even at 55, you've already lived quite a life from the likes of it, all the stuff that you've experienced. And I mean,
I'm very grateful. I'm very, very grateful for a lot of things, and looking back again at some of this health stuff, I think you started touching on it. But when COVID hit, I think this has really, really opened up that much more why it is so important to be healthy, to live a healthy lifestyle, to, if you're looking at immunity, if you're looking at, your nutrition, you're looking at what kind of movement you're doing, whether you are, a bodybuilder and really, really focusing on that, or you just want to get your life back on track. I know a lot of people who were extremely healthy who did get COVID, but and some of them said, "I can't believe I got this. I'm such a healthy person." But I say, "Wait a second. If you hadn't been as healthy as you had, you wouldn't have gone through it as easily as you had." So, these things are always relative, and prevention, prevention, prevention. I'm huge on that.
well, you're gonna learn. So I actually got it in early, like so. I went to the casino probably like 2 weeks before all the league shut down and everything like that, and that had to have been the place where I got it because I didn't go anywhere else other than work. Which I mean, we didn't have any outbreaks at work, so like literally about a week before everything shut down, I started feeling kind of funny, and I didn't really think it was coronavirus because back everyone forgets that like right before everything shut down, no one really had that much attention to it. Like we had a state hockey tournament of 20,000 people before that happened. So I was feeling kind of funny, and then I was just in my room, just I didn't like leave my room really for like 4 or 5 days. I went back home and I was just like, yeah, I'm just gonna stay in my room and not really do anything. And it was kind of like the flu for me. And then when you could go and get your antibodies tested, I went in and then they're like, oh yeah, you had it. Yeah, you have the antibodies for it, so you
So you had
definitely
the
had it.
antibodies. Wow.
So I was like, okay, that's interesting to share. And then they tested all my family, and no one else had it. So I don't know how it didn't get passed on there. But yeah, for me, it was just like But yeah, again, you nailed it perfectly. Where I always say, if this is the one thing, if this doesn't convince you to get in shape or at least adapt a more healthy and fit lifestyle, I don't know what will. Because yeah, there are cases of and yeah, there are some extremely healthy people that have unfortunately passed on. I can guarantee there's probably a handful of them, but you are very, 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 very less likely to have severe complications from this if you are healthy and in shape. And unfortunately, you see like all these stories in the news where they're like, oh, a 28-year-old dies of coronavirus, and then you look at their photo and you're like, okay, they weigh like 350 pounds, like so that's one thing that I really think that if anyone can take out of this. And I've had friends too that have also taken that message too, and they're just like, hey, I really need to start getting in shape. So I think if there's one positive that we can take out of this tragedy, that is, that maybe some people realize that, hey, in case something like this ever happens in the future, it's better to be prepared by having a healthy and strong immune system.
And that's another thing too when it comes to even those who train or those who are looking for something out there. What I think Zoom and so many things did. Yes, I used to train people online all the time, but it was looked at, I don't know, if I can do something in person, I would not do something, over Zoom or online. Now that's changed everything. And even the technology is there to where sometimes people even prefer that. And I think you can actually make more of a difference when you are with them, literally, not just, let's say, in the gym doing something for somebody who needs motivation, but being able to follow up later on outside of the gym, because that's where the accountability comes into play. And that's where the support really is a huge thing. I mean, I think for all of us during this time, I mean, it was really tough. I think different people dealt with it in different ways, different sense of, you felt a sense of loss. You also felt a sense of, if anything, you didn't have that independence that you might have because you said you had to move in back with your folks. All of a sudden, everybody's together. And that's why it's so important to have a routine and to have a ritual, because all of a sudden, school, work, family time, nothing's separated. You've got kids in one room doing one thing and literally a parent in another one having to get on business meetings and things like that. No separation whatsoever. And that created, I think, a lot of extra stress too. So one thing that I would tell people, you really need to get those routines and rituals, whatever those may be, down and follow them and separate one from the other. Don't get up in your pajamas and get straight onto a business meeting or anything
Well,
like
I'm not gonna lie. There have been some podcasts where I have my pajamas on, but people can't see me. People can't see me waist down. So this is the one job that I can do where I can do that. It's not like that today, but so like my little brother, even, I mean, he graduated college last spring, so he had to deal with all this, and it's just. I mean, I feel so sorry. At least he wasn't in high school, because I can't imagine what that must have been like for those seniors in high school. Because I had one of them on who they were homeschooled though, so it doesn't really count. But I just can't imagine what this, and like you said, this lasting psychological damage. I mean, people aren't talking about the mental side effects as much as they are, as they should be, at least, because this is going to change a lot of people, I think, for a vast amount of time. I mean, maybe for their entire lives. Like, I remember my great grandma, she still, to the day she died, she buried cans of money out in her farm because she suffered through the Great Depression and she didn't trust banks or anything like that then. So literally, when she died, in her will, she said, like, I've buried a couple $1,000s in money all over the yard. It's your job to find it, basically. So we had a field day trying to find it, but we eventually found at least most of it. Who knows? We sold the house, so maybe
that. Oh
the
my God.
maybe the new people that have moved in, if they ever dig around, they might find a couple extra $100 or something laying around. But it's up
That's
to them now.
absolutely
Yeah.
amazing. That's amazing, Ryan. That's really good. But you bring up some really, really good points. And I have a senior right now. My
Oh,
last of four is a senior now. And my second daughter just graduated in May from college. No, not even an online ceremony or anything. So I hear exactly what you're saying and how to deal with it. One piece of advice that I do have, this is why it's so important to go after what you want now. Um, I am so glad that 2 years ago I had the chance to go abroad to the three championships that I did. That the last one was Greece in 2019. I've been able to travel abroad. My daughter, who just graduated, she spent a year 6 months backpacking and a year in Spain. These are things that so many times we tell ourselves, "Oh yeah, well now's not really the time. I really want to do this, but I'll wait till later." Well, later may or may not come. And I think what we're seeing with the pandemic, especially, and how things have shut down and shut off, you know, it's about finding challenges without worrying about what I can't control, rather finding those things that I can control. But if you can, go and do it, and do it now.
I totally agree. And there's always been a thing in our family where we have, I mean, I'm the vast majority of my heritage is Norwegian, so we've always wanted to go to Norway and visit our relatives because they come over like every couple of years and they visit us and they bring the best chocolate, which I mean, I'm drooling about just thinking about that right now. But we've always wanted to go back there and visit, and I think we're next summer, if everything's cleared up by then and we're able to actually travel abroad, we're planning on actually doing that because we would always say, oh, next summer we'll do it when they come and visit us, and they're like, oh, you come to Norway, you come visit us, and then oh, next summer we'll do it. But now I think that we've actually taken that to advice right there. And I gotta say, so you're close to the Dallas area. My parents, before this pandemic hit, they went to Dallas on that was their vacation. I said, going to Dallas really for vacation? I was like, you couldn't choose a better spot than Dallas. I mean, you couldn't have gone to like a different country or whatever. But well, they had to go. My mom and dad are like big JFK people, so then they had to go visit that, and they had to go visit all that other stuff. So but they were really interested down there, so I just want to throw that tidbit out there. But yeah, so how is your senior dealing with it in high school? Have the schools opened up and everything? And I know Texas football. I mean, there's no way they're going to cancel that.
True, and it's tough. With For her, she actually decided we have the choice to either do virtual or go in person. The virtual was the first 3 weeks. She decided to go in person. She said, it's my senior year. I really want to be over there. And she said, I study better that way anyway. I mean, or just having access, especially, if I don't want to put stereotypes here, but if you're a typical girl that may not like physics that much, it's a lot easier to get the instruction that you need being in school than out of it.
Hey, I didn't like physics either. I'm just going to put it out there. That was probably one of my least favorite
And I might
subjects.
add, she's an IB. If she gets a 98, that's like, oh my gosh, this is a terrible grade kind of thing. But she was saying, by being virtual, she said, I get more done because it's not a lot of the busy work while being in school. But it's crazy. There one person at the lunch tables. So it's like having lunch on your own. Everybody, of course, has to wear masks in school. I mean, I think they're anywhere between 4 and 8 people in our classroom, in a lot of them. And already some people are deciding the next 9 weeks they want to go virtual as opposed to in class. So it's a very, very, very different way of looking at it. But doing it virtually, she said, Mom, my head hurts, my eyes hurt all the time because it's a constant screen. So you're seeing a lot of kids out there, and I think a lot of youth who are having to go through times that none of us ever thought it would be this way. It is a little crazy, Ryan.
Oh, I can guarantee you when staring at the screen all day and doing all these edits and stuff, yeah, you go a little stir crazy, so you gotta walk out every every once in a while. But I have that type of ADD where if everything was at home learning, I would not pass any. Like I you wouldn't be able to get me to sit in for even like a physics class, like you said. I would last about 5 minutes and I'd be like, this is boring. I'm gonna go watch some stuff on YouTube instead of just going there. So I am glad that this didn't happen when I was still in school. I'm glad that I'd graduated a good 2 years before all this really went down. So I am thankful for that at least. But when it comes to, the adaptations that you had to make and all this stuff that happened with the quarantine during the pandemic, how did your workouts change at all? Because like you said, you had a few things in your house, but you didn't have the access to the gym that I mean you had been using for forever.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what was very important to me as well, because in my mind, I knew that I was going to get, or supposed to, in the beginning of the year, have ACL surgery and then even a foot surgery. And so in my mind, I wanted to be able to train as much as possible. And I find it's very important to what I call not just rehab, but prehab. Any kind of injury, especially if you're an elite athlete or so, you want to get that done before. You don't wait until you have surgery later on. So that was very difficult as well. Now, of course, the surgery was postponed for a while because for a while there were no elective surgeries. And that was my opportunity to do as much as possible, not just to strengthen my leg, my knee, and get the workouts that I needed in, but also be able to prepare it for after the fact when I wouldn't be able to use that leg exactly the same way. But you're very right. I found ways around. I mean, it was so interesting. Just I had fun doing some of the videos I did because I'd go in and I said, I wonder what this would do, or I wonder what that would do. And I've trained now enough to where there's a lot of a body mind connection, muscle and mind connection. And so if I said, okay, I really want to work my quads and I start doing something, well, if I don't really feel it there, then it's not doing anything. And so it was adjusting angles, adjusting, because you can't, if you don't have that much equipment at home, you're limited in the amount of weight that you actually have. Now, weight doesn't mean, you don't have to lift heavy to see results. And that's where time under tension comes in, using certain bands or repetitions, doing more repetitions, going slower, going faster. Those were the kinds of things that were very useful in adapting, not just for me, but even being able to take those then and share that with others as well. That was really key.
Well, and you mentioned mind to muscle connection, and that's one of the things that I love to preach on here because so many people don't understand that. And when it comes to even figuring that out, it takes people years upon years to develop that. I mean, we've had people, like 5, 6 years, and it's something that I think really separates a lot of people when it comes to the results that they get is that mind to muscle. But how long into your journey before you really started to feel that mind to muscle connection? And people don't realize as well, like let's say if you feel mind to muscle connection in your arms, doesn't mean you're going to feel it in your legs too. It all depends on the body parts too. So that's what makes it even more frustrating, I think, for a lot of people.
I think it was a good 4 or 5 years, into actual competing. I mean, I've worked out all my life, but when you switch to a competition type format where you're literally looking at your body each year, and at the end of the season, you're saying, okay, yes, I'm going to work my whole body out, but this next season, I'm going to focus on delts, or I'm going to focus on the quad sweep, or I'm going to focus on my glute tie-ins, or I'm going to focus on that thickness right there in the middle of my back. These are all very, very specific things that most people don't really think about. So I'll get people sometimes, I give them an exercise and they're like, is this for the shoulder? No, it's for your back. Do you feel it in your shoulders? But that's okay. And they aren't, they might seem silly to me now because of course you don't feel it here or there, but to them they don't. And it's teaching that if you don't feel it somewhere, or if you feel it somewhere else, and you're doing an arm exercise or bicep exercise, but you feel it in your abs, you're not doing it right, kind of thing.
I've had times where I've had that feeling where it's like I might be doing, like a row back or something like that. It's like I'm feeling it a lot more in my arms than I am in my back. So I might be doing something a little funny. But yeah, that's
I'll
how your
tell you
body
what to
reminds you.
do right now. Let's fix that right away, because right, that's why back and biceps usually go together if you are doing both of them. But if you're doing a row, and bicep will be secondary, but what you need to do, Ryan, is pull through with your elbows and your back, and don't even think about your arms or your biceps pulling back. What you want to do, you're literally using that elbow to pull back and the back, and that'll change everything right
Okay,
there.
yeah, because I do those rows. We have a row machine downstairs too, and I do that.
Right.
I do that.
Usually you
Yeah,
think
yeah.
of rowing
Yep.
back. No, it's keeping those and pushing through the elbows. The arms and your hands are just coming along for the ride.
Yep. So that hey, we learn something new on this podcast every single time. So hopefully we're fixing something. But you mentioned before that shoulders were the one area that you really wanted to improve on the most, and you've just trained them to death. How would someone train shoulders, especially during this pandemic with the limited equipment? Because that's I think a very specific body part that they don't really build stuff for when it comes to training them.
You'd be very surprised what you can do even just with pumps. So many times when we're doing even a raise, a lateral raise, the minute you lift past here, you're lifting that's your trap. That's not really your shoulder that's coming out. So one of the ways to do that is take, even if it's only 10-pound or 15-pound dumbbell, or just a plate or rice or whatever it is, and very slight pumps up and down, but using not this way. You want to really just use that shoulder. Same thing goes for, it's very important you can be very specific with the three heads of that shoulder. So many people just think about Arnold presses, or they think about lateral, side raises, or so it's the sides. They forget about the front and they forget about their rear delts. And that's really what makes that entire ball look the way it's going to look. So please don't forget those.
I mean, the general public, yeah, they're saying, wait, there's three parts to the shoulder. They just assume that, hey, if I just do lateral raises, all the time, it's gonna really help. But one thing that I've really picked up on during this time is a lot of cardio, just because I have all this free time and, going on long walks where, I'd go on like 100-minute walks, get like, 9 miles in. But I've now run out of movies to watch because it's the only way I can stay on the treadmill for that long. What has your relationship with cardio been like, especially during this pandemic?
You're right, and it's great. In Texas, it's hard because it is so hot over here that it's really hard sometimes for some people to go out. I have always been very fortunate that when I'm not necessarily in season, I do minimal amounts of cardio. I still think, stair stepper is great. But because I control it with my nutrition, I think the nutrition is so much more than the actual cardio itself. But I'll tell you something that was great this summer. If you have access to a pool, swimming is one of the best exercises that you can do even for cardio, and especially if you have certain joints, whether it is shoulder or knee or whatever that may be, it's very easy on the joints. If you don't have a pool, no worries, go out to a lake. It might be a little murky, it might be a little brown, but that, or the ocean as well. Go swim. Swimming is fantastic if you can't run. The other thing, but that's not the cardio side. I have seen several people who have completely transformed during this pandemic, just doing pull-ups, push-ups, and sit-ups. Literally doing maybe hundreds of those, just those three exercises, and they have lost probably 50 pounds, have six-pack or eight-pack abs, and just look absolutely amazing just from doing that. And you don't need any equipment at all for something like that.
We had one guy on a couple of weeks ago that damaged his ribs because he was doing too much of those. He
Uh-oh.
overdid it. He overdid it where that was because that was his only equipment that he could do. So he's like, I was doing like hundreds of them, like every single day, like all of, so yeah, yeah. So, but
Well,
yeah,
be careful. I mean,
yeah.
that's the other thing. You've got to listen to your body. And you want to be able to do these things for a long period of time. There are certain things that I was stupid with, CrossFit days, and maybe even trying to keep up with a workout partner who was double my size and double my weight, and trying to do the same benching as she was. And those are stupid things to do. If you want to, if you want longevity, you do have to, just keep it real.
I've been there, you're in college, you see an attractive girl walking by and you want to know, impress and stuff like that. And then next thing you know, you wake up and you're like, what happened to my back yesterday? I can't even move now. So yeah, I think honestly, we've all been there when it comes to that. But yeah, I mean, it's just the adaptations that people have made, I really found have really just shown the best of things. I mean, I did get a little annoyed on Instagram because, every single person was posting at home stuff. And then you're just getting to the point of like, hey, you have the plethora of information though to work with. But when it comes down to just this mindset too, that you think that I mean, that that you had, since your childhood days that have really helped you prepare for this, what advice would you have for people in case this like ever hits again, that they are more well prepared, kind of like how you were because of your past experience?
Like I said before, one of the biggest things is we get down because all of a sudden we had all these plans, and what was taken away from all of us, we could not control. It was completely out of our control. So you've got to forgive yourself, your goals, anything that you wanted to do that now has been taken out of your control. Once you do that, what you can do is then say, okay, what are my goals? What can I control? And now make that plan, and then follow that plan through and find different things. I mean, the mindset is huge, but just like one of my taglines always, be fit, look fab, live large at any age from anywhere. Well, it comes to really always dreaming bigger and finding those things that you can do, and all of a sudden your confidence will grow, your achieve what you can do will grow. I've had clients during this pandemic who were actually quite depressed, and even taking meds for it, and all of a sudden, just by taking a few steps, those meds reduce themselves. And then the energy started. And then, oh my gosh, I'm seeing a difference. I didn't see it before. I'm seeing a difference in my arms, or now I'm stronger. Now I can go on a 2 hour walk, which I could never do before. Those are the little things that become very big things later on.
One thing that I think we talked about the first time you're on here though is sleep, because it's so important when it comes to this lifestyle. But now that people have had so much more free time, I mean, I know of no person that has been able to keep at least their exact sleeping schedule that they had before. I mean, with you can wake up a little bit later. What has this adjustment been like for you, and what advice do you have for people looking to maybe try to get back to that pre-pandemic sleep schedule that they had? Because I know a lot of friends too that, I mean, they're getting up at like noon sometimes, and it's going to be hard for them when their job comes back and it's like, oh, you got to get up at 8 a.m. now.
But a lot of that is also just being able to say, oh, well, it's out of my control. I can just get up whenever I want. So I think first of all, you need to bring back those rituals. You need to bring back that schedule, whatever that schedule was or whatever schedule that you want to set for yourself. So if it is getting up at 7, fine. Or if it is getting up at 9, but then we do these little rituals like brush our teeth and go into the shower, have a cup of coffee. Those parents who might be making breakfast for their kids before they go to school, these are all things that we used to do before, and we still need to find what are those little rituals, what are those things that we need to do, and separate those out from the chunks of our day where we are working, whether that is going to the office or now doing it virtually or going to school. At that, you separate that out from those meal times. Take that. It's not about eating while I'm watching something. It's literally getting up, going away, going somewhere, and focusing on, okay, now it's meal time. It might be family time, whoever's here to go and share that with. And then having those rituals at night as well. Breath work is a great way to do that. I think when you wake up in the morning, a great thing is to have a huge glass of water with lemon or even some peppermint in it. I mean, that's just going to wake you up and get you going. There are all sorts of other things out there. Essential oils are something great that can help even with certain mood. But it's finding that's going to allow you to sleep better. That is really, and setting aside that time where I'm not watching TV until midnight or 1 in the morning, and then saying, okay, now I'm shutting that off. And in your mind, you're still processing the last thing you saw. So give your mind that time. If that's why it's a great time to maybe journal right before going to sleep, because then you can think about that. Giving yourself the opportunity and doing exercise, making your body tired so that it wants to go to sleep, and it'll shut off your mind.
Yeah. I was just writing down water with lemon or peppermint because that sounds great. I'm taking more stuff from this podcast, and it sounds like that's great. But I gotta say also too, melatonin was a big game changer for me when it comes to that. Where, I mean, yeah, I that has been a big change for me as well. But you mentioned
I think I might have that exact same one too.
Yep. You mentioned surgery, and I think you were one of the few unfortunate people that I've talked to where you've torn your ACL on both legs. So, I mean, and I think so. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the first time you had torn your ACL when you were doing martial arts when you were younger,
It
and then
was. You have a great
yeah,
memory.
and then you kind of sort of compensated more on the other leg, and you ended up tearing the other one. Then,
I
so
tore it. Yes, you are right. The first one was a martial arts sweep. A guy that was, 3 times my size or so swept me the wrong way. It was what it was. But back in those days, I was told, that was back in the 80s, and I was told, hey, if you can walk on it, don't do anything with it because it's not going to get that much better. So I went for a good 30, well, about probably 27, 28 years with a torn ACL. The second one tore 4 or 5 years later on after so much overcompensating. You're right. And it was one of those things that tore without, I was literally walking. This was in Greece, walking and slipped. And I heard the pop, so it was just something that was primed and ready to happen. But I did nothing with it until about 7 or 8 years ago when my son, who blew out his knee during soccer, and at the time, we had his done, it was 12 grand. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it was crazy. But anything after that, the insurance covered. So I said, well, if I'm ever going to get my knees done, this is the time to do it. And I competed. I did things with the torn ACLs, but what I did do is I rehabbed them really, really well. And I strengthened all the muscles around. So I had the two ACLs. This was about 7 years ago. My left knee is great. My right knee was never, even after the surgery. It was never quite right. And it wasn't just the ACL, but there were meniscus issues, there were cartilage issues, there's some bone on bone there as well. Um, so that happened, and I thought, since I was going to take off from competing for a couple of years, I said this is the perfect year to then. I went back to the doctor and he said, yeah, your ACL, if the hinge is on the side, it just tore out again, but there are also some meniscus problems, and so we're going to go in, we can clean everything out if you want. Supposed to happen early on in the year, but of course COVID hit, so that's how I found out that, number one, I didn't have it, but number two, I didn't have the antibodies, because I was for sure that I'd gotten it, just like you're saying, back in March. I had the test done before the surgery in May, and no, I hadn't had the antibodies. But we're about almost 4 months out. Within the first week of the ACL surgery, I was back at the gym, being very careful, of course, with what's being done. I'm still not 100. I mean, it's doing great. I'm in the gym. I'm squatting. I'm doing everything that the physio said I can do, and pretty much back to normal. But I still don't feel it quite as good. We'll see. You know me, and you know how anti anything you put in your body I am. That's just me. 100% natural in all sorts of ways. But I think I'm going to try. Somebody told me, or the doctor, about this gel one. It's like a viscous. It doesn't do anything, but it's like WD-40 on your knee that might help with certain things. So I'll go ahead and give that a try. And then lastly, I was trying to have, which hasn't happened yet, hopefully mid-October, I need a bone spur, like a Hallux Rigidus, they call it. I thought it was a bunion, but bunions come on the side. This is on the top of the foot. So when I'm wearing those high heels that we use in competition, I can't even wear heels outside because it hurts. It excruciatingly hurts my big toe. So we'll see what happens with that, and hopefully get that's going to be 6 weeks in a boot. So in my mind, it's also now trying to train and do what I need to do to keep as much of the muscle mass as possible, which is what happened. And you saw me, I was posting things because I wanted to take people on my journey post surgery and see what kinds of rehab, 1 week out, 3 weeks out, 1 month out, 6 months. Well, not 6 months yet, but that's where we are.
Well, and I'm such a novice when it comes to especially ACL tears, because the only thing I know about them is that, like, I'm a big football fan, so anytime someone gets it, they're basically like out for a year. It used to be a career ender. I was just fascinated when you had both of your ACLs torn and you were still able to work out at all, anything lower body. So could you explain like how the ACL tear really affects your body? Because I think a lot of people, when they think of that, they're like, oh, they probably can't walk then until they get it fixed. But there's,
No, you're
yeah.
absolutely fine, because what you do. I mean, the AC, obviously it's the tendon. I wish my acupuncture chiropractic hubby were here, because he could explain it exactly how and what. But you can still strengthen the muscles that are holding the knee together, so that even though that ACL tendon on the inside of that joint is loose and separated, it's those muscles that are still holding things. So of course, soccer, pivoting, that would be very difficult to do, because it would pretty much do this and give out. That's why weightlifting was such a great, or is such a great sport for that, because it's very controlled, it's very up and down. You don't have to do these crazy side to side motions. My sister, who is a ballet mistress in Florida, has her own ballet school, and she would have me do a class, and of course my knee would be all over this place. She said, now I know why you lift weight. So you can do a lot. Now, if you wanted to play soccer, if you wanted to play basketball, if you wanted to, I mean, I could still run in a straight line, but where I feel very unstable, I have two huge dogs. One is a wolf dog, and when I take them on a walk or out on the golf course or by the creek, I feel my knee very unstable, because if they were to run towards a squirrel or anything else, I feel as though my knee would just give out.
Yeah, and I mean, hockey's such a huge sport up here, and I remember my senior year of high school, one of the best players in the state tore his ACL before the season, but he was still able to play the entire season because first of all, I don't even know how he did it, but he was a good friend of mine. But so that just, I'm just like, so I guess some people can still manage with it. So
Well, and they're different. There's different degrees of tear. Mine happened to be 90% torn, but it might be an initial tear. But if he played more, and
It might
for
have
it
been an
more
initial
than
tear. Now I think about it, it might have been an initial tear. Yeah, because when you think about hockey, that's so much side to side movement and stuff that I don't think, yeah, it could have been. But it just shows, yeah, that not every injury is the same. But one thing that I really want to talk to you about, because I sent you the link to the podcast I did with Stephanie Flesher, where we talked all about, drug use in sports, and I was really happy to get that done. And first of all, kudos to her for being so upfront and honest with me,
my gosh, she was amazing. I really enjoyed that.
because I never, for my opinion, even if I have guests that I probably more than likely know that they're doing, I never bring it up because it's none of my business. It's the guest problem. It's the guest thing. If they bring it up, then I'll talk to them about it. But when it comes to you being natural, how hard was it for you to stay natural in this sport? Because I know like all the temptations that a lot of competitors have, and especially when you're competing at these IFBB shows that you've done a few times. I mean, not base a lot of them are not natural. So how hard was that for you mentally, just realizing, like, hey, I want to stay natural and I want to, not do anything that might jeopardize my health in the long term?
So here's the thing with, obviously when I would have anybody who is first starting off doing any kind of bodybuilding, you want to see where your body takes you. You want to see what you can do on your own. So for at least that first year, that second year, see what you can do. There are all sorts of people out there that will tell you, oh, if I could just give you a little bit of this or take a little bit of that or do a little bit of the other. And yes, the temptations are huge. For me personally, just because I was a sickly child, I had celiac disease and completely, I can eat anything I want to now. I've had a lot of issues over time. And for me, the challenge has been how to overcome them and see what my body can do on its own. So while, yes, in later years, as I got into competing more and more, and I did the NPC, I was second at Masters Nationals one year in 2016. So I almost got my IFBB Pro card, but didn't because it was only the first at the time. So I haven't competed in IFBB, but I am a pro in the INBA, which is the International Natural Bodybuilding Association and Pro Natural Bodies Building Association. So there we're drug tested and it is very strict. It is WADA testing, so it's just like the Olympics. And there are times when even somebody taking a pre-workout or a protein that might have been put through a different kind of processing and have certain elements may show up or may test. And one thing I don't want to do is be on the wall of shame. I'd rather be on the Hall of Fame, not on the wall of shame there. But having said that, for me, yes, I've been asked many times, "Oh my goodness, your I have pretty good genetics, I guess." And they've said, "If we could just give you." Well, I've been doing it for 10 years. I am 55 years old. My audience, I like to show people what is absolutely possible, regardless of what your age is and what you can do on your own. So now it's gone far beyond just me. For me to take something then would deny all that I have talked about and been preaching just for myself and trying to get others who might be in their 50s or 60s or 70s and prove to them what they can do. Having said that, I don't care what you're taking, you've got to put the work in the gym. And that's what, and I really, really, I think your guest was absolutely amazing. She was so forthright. She was so, and I truly believe that too. I mean, 90% of the people that I train with or that I know are taking certain enhancing substances. And I respect them so much. And I respect what they are doing depending on what their goal is. And as long as you know what the consequences can be, and if you're okay with that, well, then more power to you.
But that's why I always say everyone look into the consequences first, especially for women, because we have heard some stories on here behind the scenes that I haven't put online because they've been told me not to, of, like, hey, I wasn't aware of the side effects before I started, and then, years down the line. So everyone, do your research. That's the best thing that I can say about anything. And just like Monica said, you still have to put in the work. I mean, there's no magic pill yet. I mean, I'm still hoping for that pill where you can take it and you don't even have to work out, and then, you put on, 50 pounds of muscle overnight. But until that gets invented, that's just unfortunately, you do have to put in the work, and it's just all about that mindset as well. But I appreciate you for, being so upfront about that, because so many people, yeah, I mean, when they talk about being natural or unnatural, I mean, it's a taboo thing, but I don't think it really should be, because a lot of people do realize that, the vast majority of people aren't. But, and there are quote unquote healthy ways to do it, I guess, or not, but you know what I mean, where it's healthier, but
Well, what's tough, Ryan, is because there are a lot of magazines that people go out and they see these, big, huge shoulders and the tapering. I mean, I'm even talking bikini girls and figure girls. I'm not talking necessarily the physique or the bodybuilding women. And people say, I want to do just like that. And this is what their workout is. And they don't realize that they're not going to get that because that is not natural. Yet there are many other people who do and can, but that's what's very misleading sometimes when you look at the magazines. And if you take things and if you take things in moderation, again, it can enhance and it can be a good thing if that's the path you want to go. But I have quite a few friends of mine for whom they started off with a little bit that turned into more, and I want to be bigger and I want to be better. And it turned really, really health wise and physically very bad for them. So, those are the things that you need to know before you ever even get started with anything. And one last thing, which is hilarious, I don't know if you've seen it or not, there's a picture that's circulating on Instagram and on Facebook. And this was from 2016, and it was a photo shoot that we did in Pittsburgh at the Masters Nationals. Was it 2016 or was that 2016 or something? I forget anyway. But yeah, no, it is. Yeah, because I think it says I'm 52 at the time. I'm 53, so it was 3 or 4 years ago. And so there's two guys and myself, and it was a photo shoot we did for an organization called Aging Evolution, which are for those that are 50 plus, et cetera, et cetera. It says age is just a number, and it has the ages. I think I was the 52-year-old. There's a 50-year-old guy and a 60-year-old guy. And that's been circulating thousands and thousands of you. And what is so funny, there's a lot of, oh, yeah, wow, that's great. But there's a lot of, yeah, age is just a number and steroids are just, or this or that or the other. And I laugh and I actually take it as a compliment because I think to myself, I am very small. I am a natural athlete. And if some people confuse that with what is possible outside of the realm, then wow, they're very, misinformed. And people think that after the age of 50 or 60, you can't put on muscle without drugs. That is completely wrong, too.
I mean, I had one person when I was really in shape in college who accused me of it, and I took it as the greatest compliment I've ever received in my life. I was like, that means I'm doing something right then. That means I'm doing, I was like, yeah, you can look at my Myoplex protein that I'm taking if you want to drug test it for that. But you brought up something that's very, very interesting, how, some people, they don't even know that they're taking stuff that might have a little bit of stuff in it. Whether it comes down to the protein that they take, they just don't know. And I've seen some people that have, they've gotten tested and they realize that, hey, there is something in there. How do you think that people should, you know, be careful when it comes to that? Because I mean, even if you're just reading stuff on the label, you don't know necessarily what might have been, just a little extra something might have been added into something that you don't know of. What advice do you have for people to make sure that they maybe don't make those same mistakes, especially if they're trying to compete in natural shows?
Well, and that's where the difference is for regular people who are taking, it doesn't matter which proteins or if they're doing pre-workouts or post something, that really won't matter for them because the amounts are so small that, whatever their preference is, that's fine. But you bring up a good point because if you are competing and if you're competing in a natural organization where you're going to be tested and something that you didn't think at all is going to show up, that's why it's very, very important to go in. There are certain companies that are WADA approved, and those are the ones that you want to go with if specifically you're worried about that. One other thing I've seen sometimes people before a competition might have sinus infection or a cold or not feel well, and they take little things like just literally cough syrup or cough medicine, and there might be a certain something in there that is one of the banned substances, and then they test and all of a sudden they tested positive and everything they've done is down the toilet. So those, if you are competing in a natural organization, very, very, very important that you look at all the ingredients of everything that you are taking. And usually, a while beforehand, you want to stop taking anything that you think might even be suspicious. That's real important too. There are a lot of natural supplements out there. There really are.
Yeah, and I gotta say too, don't buy stuff from other countries too, because I mean, especially like if you buy, there's a lot of stuff online that's like in Russia and stuff like that, and you have no idea what's put in that stuff. So we've had some stories with that as well. But one question, the last couple of things before we wrap up that I wanted to ask you specifically, because one of the reasons why I have been doing a lot of cardio is because I just turned 26 July 15th. So I went in to get my physical done because I'm going off my parents' health insurance when you turn 26. So I went in and I got tested and they're like, "Oh, you have high blood pressure." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's weird." It took me about 10 seconds to figure out why, because my job that I had at UPS where I would work nights and I'd get off work, gas stations were the only thing that were really open, and sunflower seeds, being a former baseball player, are my I'm addicted, to say the least. I mean, I have cut myself down to one bag a week. That it's kind of like it's my smoking basically, where it's I'm cutting it down, but that probably is a lot, and it has gone down. I mean, it was at like 140 over 105 or something like that, but it has gone down now. I think like it's like 128 or something like that. So I've been managing it, but what advice do you have for someone with high blood pressure to help decrease it? Because I mean, we've heard exercise too is a big one, but there's also nutrition stuff that can be done as well.
Nutrition is huge. I mean, that's one of the biggest things, like you're saying, and even going first off, when you're looking at the type of cardio that you're doing, there's different kinds of cardio. There's cardio that's going to help. There's fast pace where you are burning fat, but then there's other cardio where you're burning the fat and muscle and everything at the same time. So I like to use fat burning cardio as opposed to the other. And what that means is keeping your heart rate, for example, somewhere between 120 and 140, as opposed to keeping your heart rate at 180 the entire time. So you might be walking at a very fast pace or doing a stairmaster where you're going pretty slow, but you're doing it for an even period of time. Or sometimes some of the hit cardio where you might be 30 seconds going really, really fast, but then you've got 2 minutes or so where you've slowed it back down. That's on the cardio side. Now, when it comes to the foods, sugars, 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 get rid of those sugars, whatever that means. And, when you're talking about the seeds, yeah, those are great, but once again, in moderation. And it's also the time of day, because just think of any kind of natural exercise, just by walking, by even what you're doing right now, Ryan. You're burning calories right now because you're sitting, you're nodding, we're having a conversation, your brain is working. At night, that doesn't happen that much. So think of when you are going, if you're going to have any sugars, if you're going to have any carbs, bring them in earlier on in your day. And as the day progresses, because give them to your body so that your body can use them, as opposed to later on when your body doesn't need them. A gentleman who competed, it was his first year last year. He was one of my clients. He's 60 years old. He did fantastic. He won a gold medal at the Natural Olympia last November. He'd been training with me for last year's season. The day before he did his first competition, actually the week before, because of the very specific diet, because of the exercising, his doctor had said, "Oh my gosh, your blood pressure has got you. Get off the blood pressure medication." We cried together. And it was a moment that wasn't necessarily the plan initially, but just the fact that he could get off of his blood pressure medication as a side effect of doing training. So, good diet.
That too. Well, I mean, one of the most inspiring stories I had in this podcast was Judy Weichmann, where she was talking about how she had MS, and because of the working out, the MS, it hasn't progressed. She still has it, but it's not going to. Yeah, and so because I have an aunt that she's in the very last stages of MS, so I've seen how devastating that can be. So that's just super super inspiring. But I wasn't going to ask this question because who knows what it's going to be like a year from now. Like I said, if I were to ask this, I don't want to jinx everything by asking what it is, but because it's been 8 months, and hopefully, if when I have you on in 8 months to a year from now, I mean, there won't be like a burning fire in the background when you're talking, or there won't be like a scorched earth behind me. So, but who knows where we're going to be at. But other than the stuff that we can't control, like you're talking about, where would you like to be at a year from today if we were to talk? What are some goals that you'd like to have achieved?
My cup is always half full. I just believe that way. I would love to see us opened up that much more in another year's time to where I am fully healed from ACL, from foot surgery. I am training both myself and others. I would love to. One thing I had hoped to do is go and judge a competition in South America, in Argentina, this coming March. Obviously, that won't happen, but I'm hoping that that will happen the following year. Really, really excited to take all this down, to South America as well. Oh my gosh, by then also I might be an empty nester finally because my senior will have graduated, which gives more time to do all sorts of things or not. And you know, this won't be in 1 year, but one of the things I think I told you about this way back when my husband and I were 5 years married, we went backpacking. We left everything and went backpacking for 2 years around the world. Now that will have been a bit over 30 years ago now. And so it's time within the next maybe 5 or 6 years for backpacking trip number two. And that's something that already I'm going to start putting those good intentions out and do. I don't think I'm going to wait another couple of years before I compete. I've always said I have nothing to prove to anybody except myself until I'm 60, and that's going to be in about 4 years. So yeah, I'll definitely be on stage then. But what I'm going to do in the meantime, we'll see.
Well, yeah, you and my mom both are going to be excited because I should be moving out now in January because that's when the rent's going to be super cheap. It's always at the beginning of the year. So I literally moved out for about a month and a half, and then the pandemic hit, and then I was just like, oh great. Great. This is fun, but my little brother, who knows when he's going to be out, so hopefully that'll be around soon enough too. But yeah, I mean, again, Monica, it's just so great talking to you, and I mean, like you said before, it's like I don't know what if we're gonna get bored talking about. You have so many stories that literally I could have you on weekly, and we would just be able to go for it. But again, I mean, thank you so much for coming on. I really really appreciate it, and everyone go and check out her Instagram page down below. I mean, you'll be so inspired, and get off the couch and stop eating those Twinkies. But again, Monica, thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ryan. Pleasure as always.
All right. Well, this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing out. Have a great day, everyone.